what you read on Facebook versus facts. Bill Gates, vaccine, India, 48,000 dead or paralyzed, but not mentioning the year. And then somebody spilled the beans. According to the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics, the polio vaccine program launched by Bill Gates paralyzed 47,000 children in India in 2011. The year was 2011 that was mentioned. You gave me the journal name, and it's 47,500, not a round number of 48,000. I'm going to use both in the title of the video. Polio vaccine and Bill Gates. That's a little bit too precise to keep me from finding the original paper. IJME, Indian Journal of Medical Ethics .in for India /articles /polio-program -let -us -declare -victory -and -move -on. Let us declare victory, move on. An opinion piece by 2 fucking doctors in India that didn't like Bill Gates funding something that they weren't going to get the funding for. Hey, anti-vaxxers. Welcome to my jungle. The Indian Journal of Medical Ethics reposted 2 doctors' claim that Bill Gates' polio vaccine didn't prevent 47,500 children from being paralyzed in 2011 because they had acute flaccid paralysis not caused by polio. Or the vaccine. What? The paper said this: non-polio acute flaccid paralysis in India was observed as being directly proportional, causation or correlation, to doses of oral polio received. And where did they get their data from? The people who are administering the polio vaccine. The people who are administering the polio vaccine told you that they caused 47,500 new cases of non-polio induced paralysis? Yes. Why? Because the only people in the country during that year that were counting people who showed up before they were vaccinated for polio, already paralyzed, were people administering the polio vaccine. Because every other doctor would just assume if you were paralyzed or had any form of paralysis or muscle weakness, it was caused by polio. They didn't make the assumption. They did a simple exam and found out that you did not have polio. You had some other cause. And in some cases didn't vaccinate you because it's not going to prevent the problem. It's already happened. Wait a minute. The vaccine didn't cause the acute flaccid paralysis. It's because they showed up before they were vaccinated with it. That's quite a little detail not to put on your Facebook posting, huh? So instead of saying, according to the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics, polio vaccine program launched by Bill Gates paralyzed 47,000 children in 2011, it would read, according to the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics, the polio vaccine had no effect on things that aren't affected by polio, and that the Bill Gates project administrators noticed 47,500 children in 2011 were already paralyzed before they showed up to get vaccinated, and decided to write down that fact. Meaning there's something else causing the paralysis because, again, the children showed up without being vaccinated first. And they didn't have polio. They didn't have the other symptoms that would be required. The paper said it is that this form of paralysis is clinically indistinguishable from polio paralysis, but twice as deadly. Which means it affected whether or not their lungs can inflate or not. You see, if you actually get polio these days, the number of deaths is very low because it doesn't affect the spine in such a way that it shuts off the ability to breathe as often, because the person usually gets the variety that has less likelihood of doing it, and more important than that, Most of them are vaccinated so they don't get it in the first fucking place. Or if they get it, it's much more weakened so it can't paralyze their lungs. So what else could cause the paralysis? Well, let's see. India has a problem with garbage heaps and massive amounts of chemical waste and massive amounts of industrial waste killing people. And some of the listings for flaccid paralysis and acute flaccid myelitis list the different diseases and chemicals and conditions that can cause this form of paralysis or muscle weakness. And then they show you the incident rate by country and continent. And there's a big red fucking blotch on India. What happened before this is that a bunch of people didn't have training so that they would know that when someone came in with any paralysis, maybe they should just not assume it was polio. And then they found out a shit ton of people came in with a muscle weakness, either from an actual polio incident or came in not having polio. It was some other damn thing, so they started investigating it. But these two knuckleheads decided to say this. India has been polio-free for a year because of this program that worked. There's been a huge increase in non-polio paralysis, or you were able to count it and notice it, because there's no point in giving somebody an anti-polio treatment for after the fact when they're already paralyzed and it isn't polio. You were just now aware of something you didn't know about. And then they said this: getting poor countries to expend their scarce resources on an impossible dream over the last 10 years to eradicate polio is unethical, even though in the previous fucking sentence you admit it worked. The effort cost too much. It was $8 billion to prevent only 500 or 700 cases of polio. No, it was to prevent a lot more of that. You ended up preventing the previous year of 700 or 500. Before that, it was several 100,000 people gotten sick, or maybe thousands. What you're complaining about is the $8 million was well spent because it worked. And you're complaining about now noticing there's a bunch of people who are paralyzed and it isn't polio, and you can't just use that as a blanket diagnosis anymore because nobody gets polio anymore because Bill Gates helped. The critique of the paper is quite entertaining. I'm not quoting it. The vaccinators were the only people who were counting how many people came in with polio symptoms and how many people came in with some other pre-existing condition. If they came in already having had polio, vaccinating them would probably not be useful and might actually be harmful, so they would advise them not to have it. Other people came in from having the inability to use an arm or a leg or whatever. They weren't dying, but they came in, can you give them a vaccination to help? They then had to determine whether or not the person had had polio, and they figured out if somebody hadn't, yes, they could give them the vaccination, but they needed to go to the hospital or be treated differently, because that's responsible. So I'm going to repeat the claim. The Indian Journal of Medical Ethics said, no it didn't, polio vaccine program by Bill Gates paralyzed 47,500 children in 2011. What was actually said is the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics published a claim by two random doctors that claimed polio vaccine helped along by Bill Gates prevented almost 100% of the polio in the country, but they didn't think it was necessary, which is bullshit, and didn't have an effect on children getting paralyzed from something completely unrelated because it doesn't do that, and decided they wanted the money to be spent on that instead because that was more important. That's a decent point. But that has nothing to do with Bill Gates intentionally causing paralysis in 48,000 children or killing them. And you guys don't tell us what percentage died and what percentage got in. If you don't tell us what percentage actually died versus the number of people who were paralyzed versus the real cause, which had nothing to do with it, we can assume you're lying. Now, all of you out there who are keyboard warriors, go on Facebook, go from the top to the bottom assertion below on the video. Don't include the links, where it ends in 47,500 cases of non-polio AFP, period, right above the first link. Don't include the Metabunk link. Cut and paste that in text file immediately to every one of your friends that's anti-vax and ask them, I want you to critique this. And you know what's going to happen? The person who posted is not going to listen, but everybody who had posted is going to get it in their input feed and see, oh, I've been repeating a lie. And then they'll have a conundrum. Keep using propaganda to try to get rid of vaccines for some reason? Or stop fucking doing that.